In need of references for your research? Do you want a search engine that is easy to navigate? And do you want it free? If you are a student, researcher, or teacher looking for socioeconomic references and materials, then SERPI is for you. To access SERPI, just visit the PIDS website at www.pids.gov.ph and click the SERPI widget. Or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERPI is an online database of socioeconomic studies and materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies and other academic and research institutions. SERPI has a wide variety of socioeconomic materials such as journal articles, books, working papers, policy notes, research papers, and newsletters. SERPI has 52 partner institutions that contribute publications to the database. SERPI has a wide coverage of materials encompassing 20 research themes. You can search by keyword or author, by publication type, by research theme, or year published. SERPI has more than 7,000 materials with full text that you can download for free. Enjoy searching! Visit SERPI now and follow us on Facebook. You may also send a message for inquiries.
Policies can either make or break a country and its people. Hence, they should be thoroughly studied and evaluated. This is where policy research comes in. Through Malacanang Proclamation 247 in 2002, the government declared the month of September as Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM. The DPRM aims to promote nationwide awareness on the importance of policy research in the formulation of evidence-based policies, plans, and programs. It also aims to cultivate a strong culture of research and research use among decision makers and raise the public's literacy on socio-economic issues. The proclamation also designated the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, to oversee and coordinate all activities related to the DPRM. Various activities such as policy forums, press conferences, social media promotion, and the annual Public Policy Conference are organized by PIDS and its partners to celebrate the DPRM. Every year, the DPRM focuses on a particular theme, which is usually a current or an emerging development issue of national significance. For instance, the DPRM is centered on issues pertaining to regulations, risk reduction and management, decentralization, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the new globalization, and the reforms needed to address the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This 2021, to follow through on last year's theme on innovating governance for the new normal, the DPRM is focusing on the theme Reset and Rebuild for a better Philippines in the post-pandemic world. Through this theme, we wish to emphasize that to rebuild from the COVID-19 pandemic and create a better Philippines, we need to reset our paradigms and practices by balancing the interests of people, profit, and planet. This means placing equal importance on economic, social, and environmental well-being and sustainability. To make this possible, the government should set the right policies that will allow all citizens, regardless of status in life, to access essential public services and will protect all segments of the population, especially the poor and the vulnerable, from various risks through effective social protection systems. The business sector, for its part, should explore ways and areas where it can be both profitable and socially responsible. Business owners and operators should embrace decent work principles, provide the best service to their customers, and care for the well-being of their employees, the community, and the environment. Meanwhile, The civil society should continue reaching out to sectors that do not have access to government channels. It should also strengthen its advocacy for more accountable and responsive governance and more sustainable business practices. The academe also has an important role to play. It should ensure that the new modes of delivering education and training under the new normal are accessible to all and will not widen economic and social inequalities. As individual citizens, we also need to start living more responsibly by adopting more sustainable lifestyles. We should start the reset and rebuild agenda with ourselves to effectively influence others. Collectively, we all need to work together. The government, business sector, academe, civil society, and the general public should join forces in pursuing a shared vision of an equitable, sustainable, and resilient post-pandemic Philippines. Know more about the DPRM and how you can participate by visiting its website.
Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need a communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga pulisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga pulisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan diin ang kahalagahan ng pulisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan.
Policies can either make or break a country and its people. Hence, they should be thoroughly studied and evaluated. This is where policy research comes in. Through Malacanang Proclamation 247 in 2002, the government declared the month of September as Development Policy Research Month or DPRM. The DPRM aims to promote nationwide awareness on the importance of policy research in the formulation of evidence-based policies, plans, and programs. It also aims to cultivate a strong culture of research and research use among decision makers and raise the public's literacy on socio-economic issues. The proclamation also designated the Philippine Institute for Development Studies or PIDS to oversee and coordinate all activities related to the DPRM. Various activities such as policy forums, press conferences, social media promotion, and the annual Public Policy Conference are organized by PIDS and its partners to celebrate the DPRM. Every year, the DPRM focuses on a particular theme which is usually a current or an emerging development issue of national significance. For instance, the DPRM is centered on issues pertaining to regulations, risk reduction and management, decentralization, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the new globalization, and the reforms needed to address the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This 2021, to follow through on last year's theme on innovating governance for the new normal, the DPRM is focusing on the theme Reset and Rebuild for a better Philippines in the post-pandemic world. Through this theme, we wish to emphasize that to rebuild from the COVID-19 pandemic and create a better Philippines, we need to set our paradigms and practices by balancing the interests of people, profit, and planet. This means placing equal importance on economic, social, and environmental well-being and sustainability. To make this possible, the government should set the right policies that will allow all citizens, regardless of status in life, to access essential public services and will protect all segments of the population, especially the poor and the vulnerable, from various risks through effective social protection systems. The business sector, for its part, should explore ways and areas where it can be both profitable and socially responsible. Business owners and operators should embrace decent work principles, provide the best service to their customers, and care for the well-being of their employees, the community, and the environment. Meanwhile, the civil society should continue reaching out to sectors that do not have access to government channels. It should also strengthen its advocacy for more accountable and responsive governance and more sustainable business practices. The academe also has an important role to play. It should ensure that the new modes of delivering education and training under the new normal are accessible to all and will not widen economic and social inequalities. As individual citizens, we also need to start living more responsibly by adopting more sustainable lifestyles. We should start the reset and rebuild agenda with ourselves to effectively influence others. Collectively, we all need to work together. The government, business sector, academe, civil society, and the general public should join forces in pursuing a shared vision of an equitable, sustainable, and resilient post-pandemic Philippines. Know more about the DPRM and how you can participate by visiting its website. Welcome to the PIDS webinar series. Before we start the webinar, we would like to give you a few reminders. For attendees, your microphone is muted upon entry. In case you have a question, the moderator will read it during the open forum. For those attending via Cisco WebEx, use the chat box located at the lower part of the screen. Click the chat icon, type your name and affiliation and your question, and send to all panelists. You may send your questions while the presentation is in progress. The moderator will read them during the open forum. For Facebook viewers, at least 2 questions from the comment section will be read by the moderator during the open forum. We will moderate all questions to ensure that they are relevant to the scope of the presentation. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your active participation.
Hi, Dr. Kris. You may start po.
Hello. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is the last of the 4 webinars we organized for the annual Public Policy Conference in celebration of the Development Policy Research Month. This year's theme is Reset and Rebuild for a Better Philippines in the Post-Pandemic World. With our webinar series, we aim to deepen the discussion on how we can rebuild from the COVID-19 pandemic and what policies should be implemented to achieve a fairer, more sustainable, and resilient Philippines. For those who weren't able to attend the first few seminars, so far we've talked about resetting capitalism in webinar 1, ethical business in webinar 2, green and inclusive recovery in webinar 3. This morning, we've invited experts to talk about another sub-theme, which is the robust and healthy workforce. But before we formally start our webinar, let us first hear the message of our beloved PIDS President, Dr. Aniceto Orbeta Jr. Sir Babes?
Morning, everyone. Let me begin my opening remarks by acknowledging the presence of the following who choose to be with us this morning. From the government, we have Department of Labor and Employment Undersecretary Benjo Benavides and Assistant Secretary Alex Avila. National Economic Development and Authority Assistant Secretary Greg Pineda. Department of Foreign Affairs and Assistant Secretary Gina Hamuralin, Assistant Secretary and Director General of APIC and of the APIC Philippine National Secretariat Eric Tamayo, and Assistant Secretary Maria Luia Duarte. Bureau of Internal Revenue Deputy Commissioner Lani Kui David, National Privacy Commission Deputy Privacy Commissioner John Henry Naga, Office of the Ombudsman Assistant Ombudsman Joselito Fangon, Assistant Ombudsman Pilarita Lapitan, and Assistant Ombudsman Marilu Ancheta Mexica. Philippine Statistical Research and Training Institute Executive Director Josefina Almeda, Bangsamoro Development Authority OIC Executive Director Razni Talim, Directors, Assistant and Deputy Directors, Regional Directors, Assistant Regional Directors, and other officials from the Office of the Ombudsman, Department of Budget and Management, Department of Agriculture, National Economic and Development Authority, Department of Tourism, Department of Foreign Affairs, Civil Service Commission, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Philippine Information Agency, Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, Board of Investments, Department of Energy, Mindanao Development Authority, National Wages and Productivity Commissions, and from other government agencies. From local government units, let me acknowledge the following: Luna Apayao Mayor Josephine Bangsil, Masingal Ilocosur Mayor Victoria Ina Fabis, Santiago Ilocosur Mayor Josefino Miranda, Natividad Pangasinan Mayor Rosita Rafael. From the private sector, we have Social Weather Stations Chairman Emeritus Mahar Mangahas, Philippine Retailers Association President Rosemary Ong, Bounty Fresh Food Incorporated Assistant Vice President Joan Patterson, Lazaro Bernardo Chu, and Associate President and Managing Director, Management Association of the Philippines, and Phoenix Board Director Romeo Bernardo. From the academy, let me acknowledge the following: Cagayan State University President Orduha Alvarado, University of San Carlos President Narciso Sicilian, Dansalan College Foundation President Fidelina Tawagon, Eastern Visayas State University Vice President for Admin and Finance Felixberto Avestros, University of the Philippines School of Business Dean Joel Tan Torres, UP Mindanao School of Management Dean Aurelia Luz Bimenda Gomez, Polytechnic University of the Philippines Dean Jocelyn Rivera Lutap, De La Salle University Dean Marites Chonco, Directors, Associate Directors from the Cagayan State University, Mindanao State University, Mariano Marcos State University, De La Salle University, Miriam College, UP Law Center, St. Paul University Philippines, Central Philippine University, Davao del Sur State College, and from those from other colleges and universities who are here with us today. From CSO, NGOs, and INGOs, we have the United Nations Industrial Development Organization Country Representative T.D. Monroy, Asian Development Bank Consultant Brian Macaulay, Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy President Amina Rasol Bernardo, Laguna Federation of Persons with Disabilities President Anthony Rebenque, Coalition for Agriculture Modernization in the Philippines Incorporated Chairman Emil Javier, PhilCode Program Director Jeremil Raton, USC Office of Population Studies Foundation Incorporated Director Nanette Mayol, Masaganang Sakahan Incorporated Director Daniel Agustin, Samahan ng mga Kabataang Voluntaryo ng Pilipinas Regional Deputy Director Albert Lee. Let me acknowledge also our friends from the media. Finally, let me also greet all those who are watching through the PIDS and SERPI Facebook pages. I welcome you all to the fourth and closing session of this year's Annual Public Policy Conference, or APPC. The APPC is the highlight and culminating activity of the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM. Every September, the Institute leads the celebration to promote nationwide awareness of the importance of policy research in crafting evidence-based policies, plans, programs under Malacanang Proclamation 247 signed in 2002. This year, we chose Reset and Rebuild for a Better Philippines in the Post-Pandemic World, or in Filipino, muling magsimula at magtayo tungo sa mas matatag na Pilipinas pagkatapos ng pandemya as the theme of both the DPRM and APPC. This theme conveys the importance of resetting our paradigms and practices by balancing the interest of people, profit, and planet, or by placing equal importance on economic, social, and environmental well-being and sustainability in rebuilding from the impacts of the COVID pandemic. We opened the four-part webinar series in September 14 with the topic Resetting Capitalism, which talk about fundamental concepts of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. Specifically, the session discussed how developing nations like the Philippines could build new foundations for the world economic and social systems, steer the market toward fairer outcomes, and advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. Following this webinar was the session on ethical business held on September 16. This webinar tackled how businesses can be profitable and ethical at the same time. It focused on shareholder capitalism, which considers the interests of all stakeholders, not only the business shareholders. The third webinar, conducted last Tuesday, September 21, featured the topic Green and Inclusive Recovery. It talked about the impacts of the pandemic on environment and how government and businesses can work together towards environmental resilience moving forward. For those who have missed these webinars, you may watch the recorded proceedings in our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Today, we will cap our four-part APPC webinar series with another equally important topic, which is robust and healthy workforce. As we all know, the pandemic has seriously affected our labor sector. As a result, unemployment has skyrocketed on a massive scale due to business closures worldwide. In 2021, the World Employment and Social Outlook of the International Labour Organization estimated that the global crisis-induced job gaps will reach 75 million in 2021 before falling to 23 million in 2022. The ILO also projected that the global unemployment is expected to stand at 205 million in 2022, significantly surpassing the 187 million recorded in 2019. This number corresponds to an unemployment rate of 5.7%. The Philippines' unemployment rate shoot up to 19.8% in April 2020 from only 5.1% in the same period in 2019, based on the data from the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA. However, as the economy begins to reopen, we see signs of recovery. The PSE earlier reported this month that the unemployment rate in July 2021 is estimated at 6.9%, which is the lowest since the pandemic began. However, while this is good news, the labor participation rate within the same period decreased to 59.8% from 61.9% recorded in July 2020. To caution the effects of the unemployment on Filipinos during the pandemic, Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, signed Executive Order 140 describing the National Economic Recovery Strategy, or NERS. The NERS is the government's recovery master plan for the labor market. DOLE Assistant Secretary Dominic R. Tutay explained during the DPRM virtual kickoff forum in September 2 that the NERS aimed at restarting the economic activities, restoring business confidence, upgrading and retooling the workforce, and facilitating labor market access in an enabling environment. It hopes to produce at least 220,000 jobs and assist over 1.4 million Filipinos struggling with unemployment and economic losses. In addition, the Labor Department said that the private sector has committed to creating 1 million jobs this year. Also revealed during the DPRM kickoff was that some private companies like the Jollibee Foods Corporation have implemented measures to ensure the well-being of their employees all over the world while keeping their business afloat. According to Mr. Anselio Sabado, Chief Human Resource Officer of the Jollibee Foods Corporation, the corporation focused on the source of livelihood and personal well-being of its workers during the lockdowns. As a result, the Jollibee group of companies allocated a substantial amount as an emergency response fund to provide full salaries and allowances to their employees during the lockdowns. They also offered special premium pay and additional meals to store-based staff during the implementation of the community quarantines. In addition, they implemented a work-from-home scheme for their employees. We will hear more insights on this topic through this webinar. We cover both theoretical and practical applications and local and international perspectives on social protection, skills building, and other equally essential areas concerning the developing of a robust and healthy post-pandemic workforce. We are glad to have with us Ms. Princess Hyacinth Esguerra, Director of the Human Resources Department of the Robinson's Land Corporation, Dr. Yoonyoung Chu, a Senior Economist at the World Bank, Dr. Srinivas Tata, Director of Social Development Division of United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, and Ms. Ahmma Karisma Lobrin-Satumba, Executive Director of the Department of Labor's Institute for Labor Studies. We will also hear the closing remarks of Senator Edgardo Angara later this morning. In behalf of PIDS, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today in today's webinar. I hope that our WebEx participants and Facebook viewers will stay with us until the end of the webinar. After that, I look forward to your active participation during the open forum. Again, we would like to especially thank the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or BSP, for partnering with PIDS once again in the conduct of the APPC. BSP's generous support enables PIDS to tap the expertise of respected local and international speakers for this annual conference. Before we listen to the presenters, let us watch this video which sums up the message of this year's DPRM and APPC theme. A good day to everyone.
Almost 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, nations all over the world are still grappling to address its impacts. In the Philippines, the pandemic has had an overwhelming effect on poverty and inequality, with certain groups more affected than others. Until now, people are forced to stay at home. Businesses which are already struggling to recover still have no choice but to halt their operations from time to time. And students are still finding ways to adjust to the new modes of learning, with physical classes still being prohibited. The crisis has strained health systems, exposing long-standing gaps in public health, and revealed major gaps in the current social protection systems. The pandemic has worsened existing environmental problems that the country faces due to the surge in the volume of wastes. Making matters worse are the new and more transmissible variants of the virus, causing more hospitalizations and deaths. Even countries that were initially successful in instituting protocols are once again scrambling to adjust their strategies. Most people ask, is there an end in sight? How can we move forward and recover from this crisis? It is about time that we reset our systems and start anew. Resetting means clearing errors and removing problematic parts, then rebuilding them by making the necessary improvements or by creating new ones so that we could come out of this pandemic better and stronger.
Inspired by the World Economic Forum's call for the Great Reset, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, is initiating a much-needed discussion on resetting our paradigms to rebuild our country toward an equitable, sustainable, resilient, post-pandemic future for all Filipinos. Through the annual Public Policy Conference, or APPC, which is the main and culminating activity of the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, we wish to open the conversation on how we can pursue this reset and rebuild agenda in our respective sectors.
To rebuild the country from the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to reset our paradigms and practices by balancing the interests of people, profit, and planet. Everyone has a role to play. A caring and compassionate business sector is crucial. This means placing equal importance on economic, social, and environmental well-being and sustainability. The academe should ensure that the new modes of delivering education and training under the new normal are accessible to all and will not widen economic and social inequalities. Schools should also improve their curriculum by imparting knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes that promote social responsibility and environmental stewardship. Civil society must be relentless in pushing for a more accountable and responsive governance and sustainable business practices, and bridge the gap between sectors that do not have access to government channels. Climate change has already severely affected the livelihood of most Filipinos, and the COVID-19 pandemic just worsened the situation. There is a need to strengthen measures to protect the environment and adopt climate resilience programs that will pave the way for a greener and bluer economy. The government must focus on setting the right policies to address the needs of the times. It must also improve the country's emergency preparedness, response, recovery, and rehabilitation. Lastly, the general public should reset its paradigms by adopting new practices at work, in learning, and in leisure that will help build resilience to adversities. Everyone must start living more responsibly by adopting more sustainable lifestyles.
Individually, we should build our resilience so that collectively we can be stronger as a nation, ready to fight the next crisis. Overcoming the current pandemic requires a whole-of-society approach driven by solidarity and compassion and guided by data and evidence.
Together, let us work toward a more caring business, a more nurtured environment, a more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable economy. Let us reset and rebuild for a better Philippines.
Okay, before we proceed to the presentations, may we first request for a group photo. Thea will be guiding us today. Thea?
Thank you, Dr. Kris. May I request all speakers and panelists to turn on their video? Okay. Miss Princess, sorry, but we cannot see you right now. Can you okay. You can remove your virtual background first, Miss Princess. Okay. Okay, there you go, Miss Princess. Okay, put on your best smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Dr. Kris.
Thank you, Thea. Okay, to formally begin, let me just first introduce myself. I am Dr. Kris Francisco Abrigo, a research fellow from the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Just to provide a quick background on robust and healthy workforce. Now, we are all aware of the importance of the workforce in an economy. Basically, they drive productivity and growth. In recent years, the world has become more connected more than ever because of improved technology and reduced cost of international travel. Now, this is good news for workers because opportunities have also expanded on a global scale. The drawback of this interconnectedness, however, is that workers have now become more susceptible to macroeconomic shocks. As what we have seen from the COVID-19 pandemic, a single shock can agitate the labor market and place workers in great uncertainty. For the past years, we've witnessed businesses close or limit their operations. We've seen companies utilizing work from home setups, workers facing health risks, workers losing their jobs, displaced workers transitioning to the gig economy, and skills becoming the weapon of workers in the more digitalized world. Now, today we will talk about how social protection mechanisms was used to mitigate the risk faced by workers during the COVID-19 crisis, and how we can tweak our current design of social protection systems around the world to adapt to the changing world. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our first speaker. She is from the private sector. This morning, let us learn how Robinson's Land Corporation, the leading diversified real estate corporation in the country, has led the health and safety agenda not only for their employees but also to the families and the community. Now, let us all welcome Ms. Princess Hyacinth Esguerra. Ms. Esguerra is the Director of Human Resources at Robinson's Land Corporation. Prior to joining RLC, she was Director of Organization Development and Talent Management of JG Summit Holdings, Inc. In the past years, her functional functions was on employee engagement, HR for new businesses, organization development, and talent management. In 2018, Ms. Esguerra was chosen to be part of the Board of Trustees of People Management Association of the Philippines. This is the most distinguished HR organization in the country. Mrs. Esguerra holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and she graduated cum laude from the St. Paul College of Manila. Let us all welcome Ms. Esguerra.
Magandang umaga, everyone. Dr. Kris Francisco, Mr. Aniceto Orbeta, at sa lahat po joining us in this webinar. Year 2020 is a year to forget. We have seen unprecedented challenges, and 18 months into the pandemic, we have not seen the end of this crisis. And all the more, with families relying on us, well-being has never been more important. So today, I will be sharing with you our journey into the pandemic and our vision for the workforce as I talk about health, the people's first and foremost agenda in the private sector. Can you see my slide? Okay, so as mentioned, we would be sharing with you our journey into the pandemic, as well as how our long-term plan did not change in our response to the call to rebuild the Philippines and assist in the community development. Who are we? Are the real estate arm of JG Summit Holdings, Inc. We are a 1,500 strong workforce across a very diversified portfolio, 19 mixed-use developments, 25 offices, 5 flexible working centers, 52 malls, 20 hotels, and 4 industrial facilities. We have a very wide geographical reach as far north as Ilocos and as far south as South Cotabato. With a long-term business like ours, our long-term ambition did not change, despite the challenges that we have faced during the pandemic. Next slide. Like any of us, the pandemic tested our resiliency. In a recent study of NEDA, the COVID impact has resulted to unemployment rates, Filipino livelihood vastly affected by COVID with 8.7 million workers losing their job, and the unemployment rate has been higher more than ever. And there is a lower consumption and investment as a result of social distancing rule, which affected our businesses in amusement, tourism, and restaurants, and also the rules keeping children at home. The workers' productivity is also lower due to sicknesses in the families, sicknesses of employees, as well as lack of schooling. And we know that we accepted these brutal facts of our business one by one with with a goal that we will emerge out of it stronger. And the underlying principle has been our response related to health will contribute to recovery of the business. DOH has been quick to provide for us the health agenda at the workplace and the new normal, stating that there should be a coordinated operations to defeat the pandemic between multi-sector as well as the government. And the ultimate objective would be to lower COVID deaths as well as socio-economic recovery. And there are four major areas in terms of workplace that they have put upon us in terms of DOH, workplace prevention and control. The increase in mental and physical resilience, making healthy lifestyle an everyday objective, stopping its transmission, reduce of contact rate, as well as shorten duration of infectiousness. So allow me to share with you how we have implemented all of these guidelines in our work. First and foremost, of course, our response would be to vaccinate our employees, our third parties, as well as their families. With our COVID-19 protocols and procedures in place, we move forward with our immunization response in support of the government's efforts to defeat the virus. And in our prioritization, we use the DOH prioritization based on geography, based on essential sectors and category, and based on headcount, with Metro Manila NCR, South Luzon, Central Luzon, and Central Visayas as COVID hotspots. And in our administration, we partnered with Reliance Health to ensure that we have the wide reach nationwide. We're very happy to say that RLC vaccination status to date would be for head office 94% for organic and 96% vaccination for third party, NCR 94% organic, 88% third party, and nationwide is 85% and 55% third party. And we're able to do that with our massive education campaign on the importance of vaccine and making it accessible for our people and their families. The programs to increase physical and mental resilience were also made more deliberate. We developed our intranet on information dissemination and engagement in terms of health protocols, and there are also rewards whenever they participate in our objectives. There is a telemedicine aside from our HMO and a health application that would show the health status of our people on a daily basis, and immediately will trigger us to know who's sick, who has a family member who's sick, who recently traveled, and make the necessary intervention. We know that we only see half of what our employees are undergoing, and a number of anxiety and mental stresses are happening in the workforce. So we heightened the mental health support for our employees by having information session webinars which focus on mental health, managing stress, anxiety in the workplace, practicing mindfulness, providing psychological first aid, building mental resilience as our foundational webinars. There are also counseling sessions one-on-one for employees, and everything is under a very confidential relationship. When us in HR would not know who's undergoing counseling session. The chat helpline for all employees was also made accessible, unlimited chat whenever our employees will need someone to talk to, and a booking application that will make our mental health support available for everyone. Dwell is our total well-being framework, and we use Dwell as it resonates with what we do, real estate. And we focus on 4 dimensions of well-being. The first is physical, promoting a healthy lifestyle, balancing work and leisure time in order to obtain energy to keep up with work demands. The way we engage our people also changed from a heavily face-to-face interaction. Now we moved online. We moved to Facebook interaction, online activities, online Zumba, just to make sure that our employees are physically active and also doing a number of exercises that will benefit them physically. Very important is for them to feel that there is a culture of malasakit and trust in the workplace that will affect their emotional well-being. And the tone is being set from the top. Mahirap na ang negosyo para pahirapan pa natin internally. And so with all of these communication efforts toned from the top, make sure that people have collaboration and that there is an open communication when they would need support. Mental, having the right mindset to develop knowledge, skills, and resilience to adversity. At the moment, we are a lean and mean fighting machine, and our way to cope with the pandemic is also to upskill our workforce post-pandemic. Where can we rotate talent? Where can they be productive? Where can we save jobs as a result of multi-skilling has been imperative in all of our businesses. And spiritual, giving importance to our values and beliefs, deepening our sense of purpose and meaning in life. We Filipinos, I think the reason why we're very resilient in the pandemic is our faith. And even in the workplace, we do not hesitate in practicing that. And also go back to our purpose and meaning. Mahalaga that there is a number of discussions reiterating our values so we do not forget who we are and our purpose. And that when that is being repeated and that is being applied on the ground, then it allows us to surpass the difficulty of the moment so that we would know that this workforce that we have now, we need them to build our future. Responding to the call that it's not only economic but also social environment, our business has been very relevant throughout the pandemic. Our malls, through the Lingkod Pinoy Center, has partnered with the government in providing 27 to 33 vaccination sites all over the country. The COMELEC satellite registration has been made available in our malls with 47 branches nationwide. Philippine Identification System registration in 36 branches nationwide, registering 50 million to 70 million Filipinos by the end of 2021. Temporary off-site passport services. We are awarded Safety Seal certificate confirming our establishments in the mall is safe to the public. Our Lingkod Pinoy Center allowed for satellite offices for SSS, Department of Foreign Affairs, NBI, LTO, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, and PRC, allowing people to have a one-stop shop and also protecting the community at large. And recognizing our frontliners, Robinson's Magnolia provided delivery riders lounge for our riders who needed to rest. Our hotels, selected, are used as isolation facilities under the government's Oplan Kanina. During the surge of the pandemic, the hospital capacity was not able to accommodate everyone, and we opened our hotel to partner with the government through Oplan Kalinga to accommodate patients who have mild and asymptomatic symptoms. Also, our hotels, Crown Plaza and Holiday Inn Manila Galleria, provided free rooms for medical frontliners in our area as a respite and in recognition of the work that they do in our country. Earlier this year, we have established our Robinson's Land Foundation, and our Robinson's Land President and CEO and our GBF Executive Director donated computers to Pasig City in order to support the makers' advocacy to provide public schools with tools that public education would need, computers. And in partnership with the Philippine Red Cross, we allowed access to RT-PCR through the service of thousands of Filipinos with a fast and cheaper way to test for COVID-19. Our projects did not stop throughout the pandemic, but we keep going and going. Again, I go back to the point that we have our long-term ambition and we did not go away from that. We accepted our brutal fact, but we also know where operationally we can contribute. This is our ESG philosophy. On the environment, we're happy to share that our properties are LEED certified, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, Verde, Building for Ecologically Responsive Design Excellence, certification for our new Metro Manila buildings, such as the Terra Tower in Bridgetown and Exa Zeta Tower as well. We are using environment-friendly and energy-efficient features such as LED lights to reduce power consumption, double-glazed glass facade which reduce the need for cooling, and a variable refrigerant air conditioning system that enables our Robinsons Mall to reduce its carbon footprint and making significant contribution to clean energy initiatives. On the social space, we provide employment opportunities and community development where we have presence, especially in the provinces. For example, our Robinsons Land Foundation responded to the disaster awareness, community development, and social involvement, health and nutrition, child welfare, and education. We donated bottled waters to PGH, as well as Robinson's Place Manila provided relief packs for ultra-poor families in Bacolod City. Our social agenda also recognized the need to have a balanced leadership in terms of gender. Equality, we are included in Bloomberg Gender Equality Index, and one of the examples is the RISE initiative in Crown Plaza and Holiday Inn Manila Galleria, which inspire and mentor female leaders such that by having balanced representation of female leadership, we also promote inclusivity and diversity in perspective and ensure that recognition is spread across the workplace. In COVID-19 response, employees received health kits, food packs, and COVID incentives for reporting to work during ECQ. And this applies to our organic and third party. In the earlier presentation, I always encompass our third party employees as well, because we know that they work as hard as the organic people, and we salute everyone, and we do not we provide a fair approach as we navigate in this pandemic. Again, sympathy, compassionate, and caring company as a response. RLC assisted the government to host vaccination sites nationwide. And in terms of governance, we ensure that we have transparency, compliance, adherence to the highest standard of governance, and conformance to SEC corporate governance. With our ESG in place, we know that the shareholders' expectations have increased, and this is our platform to ensure that we are also responding to the need of the community at large during the pandemic and post-pandemic. As I end, allow me to say that caring for the overall health has been the agenda of the private sector, realizing that the individual health will impact the recovery of the business soon. And RLC has placed measures that foster a culture of health, not only among our employees, but also the community at large. Muli tayong magsimula at tatayo. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Guerra, for that very encouraging presentation. Now, we have another presentation today. Just a quick reminder to everyone that we will be entertaining questions later. So we have a Q&A section. If you have questions now, kindly type in your questions in the chat box. Now, back to the second presentation will show us some salient highlights facts about the labor market and workforce in the Philippines before the pandemic, the impact of COVID-19 on jobs, and key policy areas for post-pandemic jobs and workforce development. I am pleased to introduce to you today Dr. Yoonyoung Cho. Dr. Cho is a senior economist at the Social Protection and Jobs Global Practice at the World Bank. She works on issues related to labor markets and social protection, including skills, entrepreneurship, migration, and jobs, as well as safety nets. Ms. Cho has extensive experience in development work covering the Middle East and North Africa, South Asia, and East Asia. Her research has appeared in peer-reviewed journals in the fields of economics and development, as well as numerous World Bank publications and knowledge products. Prior to joining the World Bank as a young professional in 2008, she worked for 3 years at the Korea Development Institute. She received her PhD in economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2005. Let us all welcome Dr. Yoonyoung Cho.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Ms. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Dr. Cho, we can hear you well.
Thank you so much. I'm assuming that everyone can hear me okay. Our PIDS President, Dr. Orbeta, and fellow panelists and presenters and participants from the government, academe, and ESO, and connecting from Facebook, everyone, magandang umaga po. It is my great pleasure to present some of our work on jobs and skills development today. This is really important that, during COVID pandemic, the social protection must have been the most important area of support from the government. But I would argue that going forward, the jobs is going to be a very important agenda, policy agenda from the government. So I'd like to name the presentation's title, Jobs for Filipinos and Jobs for the Future. And this is based on many statistics and studies that the World Bank has conducted with the collaboration with the government and PIDS. And this is very important for robust and healthy workforce. I'm trained as a labor economist, as typically labor economists do. I will show a lot of graphs and numbers, but please bear with me. I hope that everyone can see the slide. So the outline of this slide today. First, I will go over quickly the labor market context and pre-pandemic. And I will discuss a little bit about COVID-19 impact on jobs and workers. And I will briefly cover the government's labor market responses to COVID. Then we'll talk about some of the policy agenda related to robust and healthy workforce for the future of jobs. We are starting with the pre-pandemic labor market conditions in the country has been enjoying very strong economic growth, and the growth brought more and better jobs for the Philippines. Philippines' annual GDP growth rate, as you are all aware, averaged 6.4% between 2010 and 2019, one of the fastest growing economies in the Asia and Pacific. Many countries experience jobless growth, so they may experience economic growth, but without increases in jobs. But Philippines was a different story. It was not jobless growth. Economic growth actually created enough jobs to observe the working.
Excuse me, Dr. Cho. Can you adjust your volume? It's a bit weak. Thank you.
Let me try. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
So, as I was saying, it was not jobless growth. Economic growth has created enough jobs to absorb the working age population, maintaining a low level of unemployment. Employment grew annually by 2.17% from 2010 to 2019. And it has also generated enough of wage employment. So the share of wage employment in the Philippines increased 64% from 51% in 2000. Workers' productivity has increased quite a bit, and it was even clearer in recent years. So we divided year 2000 to 2019 period into two periods. The first period of all year 2000 to 2010 and 2010 to 2019. If you can see the green bars, it has expanded quite a bit, meaning that the productivity of workers in the service sector has increased quite a bit. Overall labor productivity, measured as output per worker growth, has accelerated. Transition to non-agriculture employment activity has also increased. Within sector productivity growth, especially the services sector, has been a major employment driver. And this is another graph that I'd like to highlight. It shows that higher paying jobs grow faster, but many low productivity jobs are still absorbing a lot of workers. So the graph's x-axis shows the daily average wage rate of certain sectors, and y-axis shows the annual growth rate of jobs. There's positive relationship between the two. This means that high-paying jobs are growing fast, but the stock of workers observed in such sector, which is reflected in the bubble size, shows that still agriculture and wholesales are the sectors that are observing the majority of workers. This means that low pay, slow growing, and workers observing sectors are the agriculture and wholesale and retail. Mid-pay, fast-growing labor observing sectors are observed in construction or other sectors like transportation, storage, and ICT. And high-pay jobs are growing fast, but they are less labor observing sectors like education and social work. These are kind of slowing growth. Real estate and business services are fast growing sector, like we have seen the Robinson's presentation. Another salient feature about the Philippines economy and the labor market is international migration. International migration and remittances have played a very important role in the Philippine economy and the labor market. As you can see in the graph, there has been an increasing number of armed migrants, many of whom are rehires from the destination countries. The unique feature of the Philippine international migration is that there are high shares of sea-based workers, and there are high shares of female workers. These are very different from other labor-sending countries. But like many other labor-sending countries, Philippines also experience the limited destination markets, mostly going to Middle East and neighboring Asia. And as a result, the remittances are up close to 10% of GDP equivalent. For a comparison, foreign direct investment is equivalent to 2.5% of GDP. So that shows the international migration and remittances are playing a very important role in the Philippine economy and the labor market. Despite this progress, and I highlighted many progress and developments over time, several stubborn challenges remain and require policy attention. First is really the quality of education and productivity of workers. We are fully aware that the education quality has been quite stagnant in the country, and because of COVID, it's going to get worse in the near future. And then the second point is really the labor regulations and informality. I know that the next presenter will talk about the informality quite a bit, but there is a large informal sector in the labor market in the Philippines. And another feature of the challenge is the firms and jobs creations are dominated by micro and small and medium enterprises. Almost 99.5% of jobs, the farms, almost 99.5% of the farms are MSMEs. So jobs are created by this large number of MSMEs, like 56% of jobs are done by MSMEs, and large farms, 37% of the jobs are explained by large farms, and the Philippine economy is missing the middle. Another feature and challenge is labor market disparities and inequality. Youth joblessness and inactivity or regional variations and gender disparity are kind of the features of the labor market disparities and inequality. Finally, on top of all this, the global trend of the changing nature of work, fourth industrial revolution, automation, greater attention to climate change and green economy require additional strategies for the future jobs market. This has been the condition for the Philippine labor market pre-pandemic. But then we experienced COVID-19 pandemic. As you are all aware, COVID-19 has shaken the Philippine jobs market massively. Would this be a turning point? If you compare with other countries, you can see from the left side graph that Philippines has used more stringent measures of lockdowns compared to other countries in the region. As a result, Philippines experienced a deeper contraction compared to the neighboring countries. So a lot of people have asked, what's the impact of COVID-19 on the labor market? But we are saying that the labor market impacts are not homogeneous, and depending on the period of time that we are looking into, there are different stages. So we are looking into 3 different stages and phases. The first phase is really the beginning of the pandemic until May, June of 2020, when there was strict lockdown, strict enforcement, and strict compliance for the lockdown. Largest social assistance program as a social amelioration program was implemented. Massive job losses, overshooting unemployment, you name it, there was a very difficult time. But the second phase of the COVID-19 is relaxed lockdown, rebounding economy, and favorable global market. So if you see the second phase from June 2020 up until March and April 2021, there has been increasing trend of mobility as in the graph. There was increasing hope with the vaccination. And you can see that during Christmas season, the mobility has kind of picked up very high, and return of business operations and jobs, although they are operating with less than full capacity. But with the second surge of COVID-19 virus, the third phase of the COVID-19 pandemic is starting from April 2021 up until now. People have lockdown fatigue, so there are lockdowns here and there, but compliance is low. And compared to social amelioration program, the non-systematic and kind of locality-based ayuda are being implemented, and there have been increasing search for work or additional working hours. Farms have reacted in terms of their operation, and that has major implications for the labor market. They have decreased in employees, that created unemployment. They have decreased in working hours because the operation was not at full capacity, that created underemployment. And changes in work arrangement, and they allowed working from home arrangement. Reduction in wages and benefits created a reduced income for the workers. But good news is that they have adopted and intensified the use of technology, and that creates increased demand for. A lot of farms adopted digital payments and online marketing tools, and these are the most commonly used and adopted technologies. The technology adoption varies by different sectors, but I can highlight that a lot of farms really actively reacted by adopting and use the technologies. and digital skills are getting more and more important. Even the agriculture, wholesale, and retail, these are the kind of the sectors that are not known for IT technologies, but it is really burgeoning in terms of IT adoption. And another COVID-19 impact on the labor market is that more people are looking for jobs. Unemployment and underemployment is still high. If you see the labor market, labor force participation rate, we see the dip during the peak COVID lockdown in April 2020, and it kind of returned in July, but it goes back down in October. Since then on, it has been adjusting in the labor market. As you can see, labor force participation of women has been increasing quite a bit. And it is likely the added worker effects that your main breadwinners have lost jobs and incomes. The secondary earners have to come out to the labor market to seek more work opportunities and earn. The unemployment has overshoot as well as underemployment during the quarantine measures in Q2 of 2020. It has gone down since then, but unemployment rate has never recovered to the pre-pandemic level. Overall decrease in the jobs, in the quality of jobs are also major implications from the pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, before the pandemic, there has been increase in the quality of jobs. Many people moved from agriculture to non-agriculture sectors and from non-wage employment to wage employment. But if you look at the employment type, occupations, and economic employment sectors, we can see that there has been massive destruction in wage employment and increases in massive destruction in wage employment and increases in subsistence business and unpaid family workers. At least it reverses 5 years of progress in this area. In terms of occupations, we observe increases in elementary occupations and service and sales workers. So we observe some of the deteriorating quality of jobs. And not only that, the labor market impact and impact on workers are not homogeneous. Certain workers are more affected by COVID-19 than others. Female experience deeper shock. Youth definitely experience deeper shock than adults. Better educated and urban workers also experience, but they are recovering fast. Not only these workers' characteristics found that the flexibility and the ability of working from home means a lot in terms of maintaining jobs and recovering jobs. Government was not idle. They have implemented quite a bit measures of labor market response due to the COVID-19. Supply side, they introduced wage subsidies, employment insurance, and other support for workers. Demand side, they also implemented major interventions for farms in terms of tax relief and other financing support. And they have relaxed the labor regulations as well. But due to the magnitude of the shock of COVID-19, these labor market interventions may not have been sufficient. We all know the government initial response was heavily focusing on social protection. It aimed to cover informal sector workers through social amelioration programs, but we all know that it is rather social protection for vulnerable population rather than targeted labor market intervention. Through Biennium 2, more employment programs and more targeted labor market responses were implemented, but the magnitude of the support was small compared to the Biennium 1 measures. And we looked into annual poverty indicator survey in 2020 released by Philippine Statistics Authority. We can see the regular social assistance coverage and the amount of subsidies for households. And the survey also measures some of the social assistance under Biennium Acts. You can see social amelioration program is the majority and dominant subsidies. There are many DOLE, Department of Labor Employment interventions, which are very important labor market intervention. And this survey didn't capture TESDAT, the Technical Education and Skills Authority, Technical Education and Training Skills Authority, Skills Development Authorities programs are not covered in this survey, but we all know that it played an important role. But compared to social amelioration program, DOLE or TESDAS programs were quite small compared to the magnitude of the COVID-19. So good jobs are needed more than ever. And governments really moved quickly in terms of formulating national economic recovery strategies, NERS 2020-2022. Dr. Orbeta mentioned earlier, DOLE took the leadership and TESDA and DTI and other government agencies participated, and it covers the broader agenda for recovery, starting from vaccine distribution and COVID-19 management to promoting collaboration between government, business, and labor all together. But given that NERS is covering 2020, what should be the policy priorities beyond COVID-19 recovery? I would argue that there are three buckets of important policy intervention. One is really strengthening economic fundamentals for jobs generation, including macroeconomic stability, human capital. Second bucket is really the improving employability and skills development and mobility of workers. That's where the workforce development and healthy and robust workforce is important. The third bucket is really ensuring the green, resilient, and inclusive development so that the labor market interventions and government policy measures are supporting the green and resilient agenda. I just like to briefly mention in terms of the robust and healthy workforce. For the future workforce, I cannot overemphasize the importance of starting early in terms of health and nutrition to education and primary and secondary education. So strengthening education is going to be very important. And for workers in transition, for individuals that are transitioning from schools to work, strengthening existing programs by better targeting, especially vulnerable youth, is going to be very important. And for overall workforce development, I'd like to highlight that there are three important measures. First one is really identifying strategic sectors. I presented the fast-growing sectors and making targeted intervention for digital skills, green skills that Philippines is picking up rapidly is going to be very important. Second, build on what the Filipinos are already doing very well, IT BPM or seafarer international migration, education and social sector. Build on those sectors is going to be very important, and make sure that inclusive workforce development by enhancing productivity for large number of low productivity workers and making sure the linkage with social protection is going to be very important. I have detailed slides for other sectors, but now I'm running out of time, but you can find more information from the World Bank website. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shaw. Those are very interesting figures and graphs that you've shown. I hope that the audience is enjoying the discussion so far. To supplement the previous presentations, we've also invited two panelists today. Let us first call on Dr. Srinivas Tata to provide international perspective on social protection in Asia and the Pacific. Dr. Tata is currently the Director of Social Development Division of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. He has been working with the United Nations for 16 years. He previously served as the Chief of the Capacity Development and Partnership Sections of the Strategy and Program Management Division. He was also Chief of Social Policy and Population Section in the Social Development Division, focusing on population aging, demographic change, migration, and health. From 2010 to 2012, he acted as the Deputy Chief of the Regional Commissions at the New York office. Let us all welcome Dr. Srinivas Tata.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. And after hearing these two comprehensive presentations, I hope my presentation doesn't come like some warm water after some fine wine. However, keeping the tempo, I'll try to my presentation will try to look at perhaps the regional perspective and identify 3 or 4 challenges that really link up to today's discussion, and then talk about possible way forward. Let me share my presentation. And Madam Moderator, with your permission, I will ask for my video to be turned off so that we are not affected by the bandwidth. Can I confirm, Madam Moderator, that my slide is vivid? Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, Dr. Tata.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know, ESCAP is the Regional Commission, United Nations regional body for promoting cooperation amongst countries to achieve inclusive and sustainable development. Now, I said there are 4 regional socioeconomic challenges that link up to today's discussion of providing a robust and healthy workforce. And when I present this, I'll be trying to bring in the Philippines perspective as we go along. The first challenge is that there are stubbornly high levels of poverty that we see in many countries in the Asia-Pacific region, despite the impressive economic growth we have seen over the past decades. Poverty is a multifaceted situation with many explanations. Lacking access to a decent job and adequate social protection, however, are key explanations. While poverty in the Asia-Pacific region has dropped considerably over the past decades, much as a result of China and India's impressive poverty reduction efforts, progress in most other countries has been slightly slower. Based on the latest data from the World Bank, around 1/4 of the world's extreme poor live in the Asia-Pacific region. In terms of numbers, that means that 175 million people are trapped below the international extreme poverty line of $1.9 a day. At $3.2 a day poverty line, the number increases to almost 900 million. Now, the vast majority of the region's poor are now found in the more populous countries in South Asia. However, there are many countries both in Southeast Asia and the Pacific where the national poverty rates are still high. In the Philippines, about 4.6%, about 5 million people are still remaining in extreme poverty, below the international poverty line of $1.9 a day. At $3.2 a day line, the poverty increases to over 25% or 27 million people. Now, the second challenge is the high and often widening inequalities in access to basic services and opportunities. Let it be water and sanitation, clean fuels, education, or skilled birth attendance. Limited access to these and other fundamental services have an enormous impact on people's resilience and life prospects. At ESCAP, we have used a classification and regression tree analysis to identify population groups that are being left behind in access to more than 15 different opportunities. This is an example of such a tree showing the access to internet in the Philippines, which is based on the demographic and health survey data from 2017. Without going into too much detail, the chart shows that the overall access rate is about 67%. That's the average. However, if you compare the access rates between the best off and the worst off, it increases to 97% for the richer individuals in the age group of 15 to 34 with a higher education, and falls to only 13% among poorer people aged about 35. As you can see, the gap between the least off, the worst off, and the people who are best placed. And we know the importance of access to internet and how critical it is in today's society, particularly during the pandemic. Now, doing this analysis for all countries for which we have data, we can compare the gaps in access between the best off groups, which is represented by the green line on top, and the worst off groups, which is represented by the red line at the bottom. The blue line in the middle is the average, or the country's average access level. This graph shows you the gap in access to clean fuels by country. For many countries in the middle of the graph, such as Philippines, gaps are large, reaching 70 to 80 percentage points. In the Philippines, the average access to clean fuels is about 50.5%, and this is based on the 2017 DHS survey. It increases to 88% for the best off group and falls to just over 5% for the worst off group. So this is essentially measuring inequalities going beyond averages. The third challenge that I want to identify is that significantly impacts the lives of families and the workforce throughout the region is the high level of informality. In Asia Pacific, close to 70% of all workers, or more than 1.3 billion people, are trapped in this kind of irregular employment. Most of these workers have no contracts, do not have access to stable salaries or social protection, and most probably performing hazardous jobs. In many countries in South and Southeast Asia, the share of informal workers is about 80%. In many countries, women are also overrepresented in these jobs. Unfortunately, the database that we use, the ILO database, did not have specific data for Philippines, but we assume that informality here also should be high. Now, the fourth and final challenge is the government's low investments in its most precious resource, namely its people. There are many reasons for this. Now, but low political commitment, lack of public support, kind of skewed priorities, and in many countries, lack of resources are important explanations why we have this low investment. Often investments in social protection, healthcare, and education are seen as costs, while building a bridge or a new road may be seen as an investment whose value is immediately evident. This view, as we know, is skewed, and it's important to understand that investing in people has a huge return on the country's development. Countries should not therefore wait to be rich before such investment in the social sector is done. Now, the insufficient spending on social protection in Asia Pacific is a good example of this. Only 4 countries in Asia and the Pacific spend more than the global average of 11% of GDP. An average that's more than twice as high as the average in Asia Pacific, which stands at only 4.9%. In fact, all ASEAN member states invest below the regional average for Asia Pacific, of which 5 countries spend less than 2%. The Philippines spending on social protection reaches only 2.6% of the GDP, which is a quarter of the global average. But please note that these numbers do not cover healthcare. They exclude healthcare. Now, this significant underinvestment in social protection, absence of schemes, and high labor market informality are the key reasons behind this deficit in social protection. While noticeable efforts have been directed towards expanding social protection, even in the Philippines, only a handful of countries in the region have relatively comprehensive systems with broad coverage. In fact, more than half of the region's population is left completely unprotected against any contingency throughout their life. Excluding China, 2/3 of the region's population are left completely uncovered. So if you look at Philippines, less than 37% of the population have access to at least one social protection scheme. So even before the pandemic, we know that millions of children lived in poverty with lifelong consequences. Unemployment pushed families into poverty with no support to find a new job. Falling ill meant losing a job or working while being contagious. Disability often resulted in poverty with no job or dignity. And without a pension, older persons were forced to continue working or depend on other family members, usually women and girls. Without affordable health care, people often do not seek treatment or wait until it's too late. And even when they access treatment, the cost of the treatment leads to catastrophic health expenditures, as they're called, leads to the family falling into poverty. The pandemic is aggravating these challenges, and many countries now face falling salaries, increasing levels of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. The pandemic risks reversing socioeconomic gains and poverty reduction efforts by almost a decade. However, several other global trends are at work, so we got to look beyond the pandemic. Population aging, increasing migration and urbanization are changing family structures and creating new vulnerabilities and demands for social protection. Rapid industrialization and technological progress are reshaping labor markets and the way we work. And our 2 previous speakers were so eloquent when they addressed these issues. and the cross-boundary nature of disasters and climate change-related shocks are underscoring the increasing need for social protection responses to better adapt to these disruptions. Our estimates, as shown in the graph, indicate that depending on the size of the economic contraction, an additional 40 to 85 million people in Asia Pacific could be pushed into extreme poverty as a result of COVID-19. The vast majority, of course, in South Asia. If you look at the more generous $3.2 per day poverty line, an additional 93 to 200 million people could fall into poverty. Using SCAP social protection simulation model, where we use household income and expenditure surveys, we can estimate the impact of extension of different social protection schemes on poverty, consumption, and inequality, as well as the cost of such a policy. I can show you the example of the work we did for Mongolia about the Universal Child Benefit Scheme and how it could reduce poverty of families with children at different benefit levels. With no scheme in place, poverty at international poverty line of $3.2 stands at 7.2%. If families with children would receive a benefit at the global average benefit level of 4% of GDP per capita, or would be 40,000 Mongolian Togrog, the poverty would fall dramatically, poverty rate to under 3%. We could also do the similar sort of work for Philippines in relation to old age pensions, child benefits, and disability benefits. How much would a basic social protection cost? We estimated that a basic social protection cost would cost only 2 to 6% of GDP for a package consisting of universal old age pensions, child benefit, maternity benefits, and disability benefits. This amount is far lower than what many people would think of and what they spend on sectors other than the social sectors, whether it be security or armed forces. Of course, it's a subjective issue which is very important, more important. As such, we believe it's an affordable cost to most countries in Asia Pacific, considering the cost on people and societies of doing nothing. Now, with one of the lowest tax GDP ratios in the world, countries in our region have great potential not only to increase revenues, but also to shift taxes away from regressive value-added tax towards progressive taxation and increasing taxation on income, profits, and capital gains, which we are indicated here as red dots. So this is an entirely different discussion, but very clearly there's a huge cushion here, the huge unexploited area that we are having of increasing tax revenues. So we all know the importance that social protection plays, and the pandemic has highlighted the importance of well-designed, implemented, and coordinated universal social protection schemes. So following recommendations, as I want to end, are the general first steps that countries should consider. So how do we expand social protection in a sustainable long-term way? One, we definitely need more resources. You cannot go on doing more with what you have. Governments, obviously, this will need reprioritizing existing expenditures and look at the focus of increasing revenues primarily by expanding tax base. Secondly, social protection schemes need to be universal. This is the key to leaving no one behind and reach those who need the support when they need it. It requires a mix of contributory and non-contributory schemes. Third, women need adequate social protection throughout their lives. How social protection is designed matters for gender equality. Fourth, informal workers need to be better protected, and mechanisms for participating and contributing to social insurance scheme need to be adjusted to allow contributions for them. Fifth, the missing middle needs to be covered. The income of this group of workers often disqualifies them from poverty-targeted, non-contributory schemes. At the same time, they do not participate in contributory schemes due to the informal nature of the work. So we need to integrate in a complementary manner both the contributory and non-contributory schemes. Of course, new technologies must create major opportunities to improve and design delivery of social protection scheme. You know that these been used to identification and registration, improving integration, reducing risks of errors, and increasing efficiency. So last but not least, let me end by a couple of words about the newly adopted action plan to strengthen regional cooperation on social protection in Asia Pacific that was adopted by SCAP member states in October last year. And they did so after acknowledging the significant gaps in social protection coverage, as well as the centrality of social protection to achieving many of the SDGs, including the theme of this discussion of providing a robust and healthy workforce. This action plan, developed by SCAP and ILO, and it was also, even in its inception stage, had 15 member states who contributed to the working group, including the Philippines. The action plan has 15 national actions to be implemented by 2030, which include setting national targets of population to be covered by social protection and to share national experience in the form of progress reports. SCAP, ILO, and other UN entities are supporting its implementation. Thank you very much for your attention, Madam Moderator, and thank you to all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tata, for your presentation. Wow, those are some very concerning estimates on extreme poverty. And I hope that we can all rise from this pandemic. And quite interesting, no, that you only need 2 to 6% of GDP to cover social protection. Okay, so we have another panelist to share her expert views on social protection in the Philippines. May we call on Director Ahmma Lobrin-Satumba. Director Satumba is currently the Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies of the Department of Labor and Employment, the Policy Research and Advocacy arm of the government. Under her leadership, ILS started the discourse on the future of work to influence policymaking towards ensuring a future-ready workforce and decent work for all. A staunch advocate of social protection, she is part of the core group that works towards institutionalizing a social protection floor in the Philippines. Before joining the institute, she had worked in various DOLE agencies that promoted the rights and welfare of workers, such as the Bureau of Women and Young Workers, the National Wages and Productivity Commission, the Bureau of Workers with Special Concerns. Director Satumba has been serving the Department of Labor for 26 years. Wow. She graduated from De La Salle University with a bachelor's degree in political science. She has a master's degree in public management from the Ateneo School of Government and in national security administration from the National Defense College of the Philippines. Let us all welcome Director Ahmma Lobrin-Satumba. Ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Kris Francisco. To the speakers, Ms. Esguerra, Dr. Cho, to my co-panelists, Dr. Tata, Dr. Orbeta, to the PIDS family, no, mukhang suki na po ata ako dito, and to everyone in attendance today, a pleasant good morning to all of you. It is both an honor and a privilege to join you in today's discussion on rebuilding a better Philippines in the post-pandemic world. Thank you for inviting us to become one of the panelists for this annual conference. We are truly grateful for this opportunity to share our insights on the earlier presentations and, of course, share what the DOLE has been doing to address the adverse impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic to the Philippine labor market situation. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Ms. Esguerra for a very enriching presentation on the efforts and initiatives of Robinson's Land Corporation, as well as Dr. Cho for a comprehensive presentation on the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly on its impact to labor and employment, and Dr. Tata, my co-social protection advocate. We specifically took notes of your recommendations, some of which have already been given attention by the department. As such, we have prepared few slides to share some of the significant progresses we have achieved so far and some ways forward for the department. Next slide, please. To start, many define this COVID-19 pandemic as a crisis like no other. Undeniably, it is not only a public health crisis, but also a social and economic one. The world of work has been profoundly affected by the pandemic. Along with many other countries, the Philippines ordered closures of both essential and non-essential workplaces to prevent the spread of the virus. On this note, we affirm the data presented by Dr. Cho on workers' productivity, employment, migration and remittances, and data related to how the pandemic has affected the Philippine labor market. While this is clearly what is happening in the country, it is also experienced by others as well. In fact, according to the ILO, on January 25, 2021, around 93% of workers are currently living in countries with workplace restrictions. In 2020 alone, 8.8% of the global working hours were lost, which is equivalent to 255 million full-time jobs. These losses resulted to an 8.3% decline in labor income, equivalent to $3.7 trillion or 4.4% of global gross domestic product. These employment losses obviously translated into rising inactivity or reducing labor force participation, which increased by 81 million. Next slide, please. How did it impact us? Based on ILO's World Employment and Social Outlook Trends 2021 report, The crisis has worsened existing decent work deficits and social inequalities, as also mentioned by our presenters and my co-panelists. While many enterprises, especially the small, micro, and medium ones, are facing uncertainty, many workers are joining the ranks of being unemployed or who are still seeking work. Further, women, youth, and workers in low-skilled jobs, often in the informal economy, have been hit harder than the other groups. While certain sectors and industries have successfully moved online, pointing the way towards exciting innovations in the world of work, issues on working conditions and related to skills were raised. Let us not forget, the pandemic has overwhelmed international labor migration, including migrant remittances and employment. While these economic and social shocks were obviously felt, the pandemic has brought to a wider consciousness the inequalities felt along various lines. This exposes the gaps between the haves and the have-nots. Slide 4, please. In response to the pandemic, the department implemented safety net programs for displaced workers in the formal and informal sectors and affected overseas Filipino workers, such as the COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program, the Tulong Panghanap Buhay sa Ating Disadvantaged and Displaced Workers or TUPAD, and the DOLE Abot Kamay and Pagtulong or AKAP. To simply enrich what was presented earlier by Dr. Shaw, allow me to briefly describe each programs and share how many individuals were reached by them. The camp provided a one-time financial support of 5,000 to formal sector workers, regardless of employment status, who are affected by the pandemic. Under Bayanihan 1 and 2, camp was able to provide financial support in the amount of 10.9 billion to more than 2 million beneficiaries. Meanwhile, TUPAD provides emergency employment to the informal sector workers. Consequently, TUPAD is also being implemented as a post-ECQ intervention where workers hired assisted LGUs in transport services for frontliners and community sanitation activities. Almost 2 million beneficiaries were assisted under the program in the total amount of 9.5 billion. Lastly, the Dole Abot Kamay ang Pagtulong program for overseas Filipino workers provided financial assistance worth 10,000 per affected OFW who have been permanently or temporarily displaced from their work, including the Balik Manggagawa, who are unable to return to the workplace due to the pandemic. Thus far, more than 540,876 displaced OFWs have been assisted through the program, with a total budget utilization of 5.5 billion. In support of these mitigation measures, DOLE intensified implementation of the inspection program, not only to ensure compliance with general labor standards and occupational safety and health standards, but as well as to assess and monitor adoption of flexible work arrangements, resumption of business operations, and compliance with new health and safety rules in accordance with the DOLE DTI supplemental guidelines on COVID-19 prevention and control. More than 72,000 establishments were inspected in 2021, covering 2.9 million workers. Next slide, please. Aside from the department's initiatives, we also recognize the whole of government approach that integrates policy approaches through interagency collaboration in the implementation of economic recovery programs. With the signing of Executive Order Number 140 by President Duterte, the National Economic Recovery Strategy is adopted, in which it endeavors the development of a holistic employment recovery plan to address the social and economic issues arising from the lingering pandemic. It is on this note that we acknowledge and affirm the recommendations thoroughly discussed by Dr. Cho on jobs recovery and the future of work and digital and green skills. Next slide, please. Specifically, we would like to share that in line with the efforts to improve the department's response to the COVID-19 situation, the Institute for Labor Studies has conducted several researches last year in aid of policy and program enhancement, namely researches on telecommuting, mental health, wage subsidy, and employment facilitation in the new normal. This year, the Institute is bound to conduct several researches anchored on the ongoing pandemic, such as studies involving human resource development for health workers, service delivery workers, OFW remittances and integration, emerging forms of recruitment and placement, our continuing advocacy on basic income guarantee, and workers' unions and organizations in time of the pandemic, all of which will be completed by the end of the year and will subsequently presented in the first quarter of next year. Similarly, we are delighted to share with you that the ILS has advocated and continue to advocate the creation of and sustaining of green jobs. Currently, there are ongoing coordination with the Climate Change Commission as they develop the Green Jobs Assessment and Certification Standards to avail of tax incentives under the Green Jobs Law. and with the Philippine Statistics Authority on the development of green job statistics, because right now we don't have an operational definition of green jobs. Okay. Next slide. On the other hand, through the National Employment Recovery Strategy and its task force, this consists of a strong 20-member agency task force. The 8-point employment recovery agenda encapsulates the convergence programs of various departments and agencies that will contribute to the recovery of the labor market by generating more employment and entrepreneurship opportunities while reviving companies affected by the pandemic. The plan is expected to generate at least 220,000 jobs and assist over 1.4 million Filipinos struggling with unemployment and income losses. On top of this, we also partner with the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, and they have committed to 1 million jobs this year. Other items in the recovery agenda include the passage of legislations and policies that strengthen economic and employment recovery, the promotion of retooling and upskilling of workers, the implementation of youth employability programs, the provision of assistance to businesses in the form of loans, deferment of fees, upgrading of processes, etc. The provision of social protection to vulnerable groups, particularly the informal sector workers, and the continuous monitoring and support of programs with high impact on employment. Included in the pipeline is the proposed wage subsidy program for private sector workers. Next slide, please. As the COVID-19 pandemic sinks economies around the world, leading to record rates of unemployment and underemployment, we have come to realize the urgency of strengthening social protection systems to provide adequate income and other necessary guarantees for all. It is in this slide that we would like to share with you that the Department of Labor and Employment, NEDA, DSWD, and other government agencies have accelerated our efforts toward establishing a national social protection floor based on the ILO recommendation adopted by its 185 member countries in 2012, on social protection floor for every country. This will set out access to essential healthcare for all and minimum basic income guarantees for children, the economically active population, and the elderly. This has been identified as a national priority and a key strategy in addressing inequality. Next slide, please. To reinforce the social protection floor strategy, the proposed social protection plan being led by the DSWD is incorporated as one of its major strategies. We envision the Philippine social protection floor to be a coherent mix of contributory and tax-based measures that will contribute to the gradual attainment of universal coverage. Okay, next slide. Undeniably, this pandemic has also made us rethink business models and redefine work. As new patterns of work unfold, how people work, where they work, what jobs exist, discussions also revolve on how we can maximize the opportunities while mitigating the risks. The shift in the labor market brought flexibility, autonomy, and unbounded labor supply and demand. Yet some concerns such as employment relationships and extending social protection were brought to our attention, particularly on the gig economy. While work and workplaces are transforming, voice and collective representation are also being shaped by current dynamics affecting enterprises, workers, and the broader world of work. However, these instruments remain to be essential in dealing with both old and new challenges in the labor market. Social dialogue is highly relevant in these changing times. Next slide, please. As we grapple the changing world of work. Consultation and collaboration among governments, workers, and employers are essential in information sharing, building trust and commitments toward an effective and sustainable responses. That's about it. Once again, thank you to the organizers for inviting us. Thank you. Dr. Kris Francisco.
Thanks so much, Dr. Shah. Okay, so we heard from the speakers and panelists today. Thank you for all of the four of them for providing us a very fruitful discussion. We are now opening the floor for questions. For those who haven't already, kindly type in your questions in the chat box. Please put your name, designation, and if you would like to specify to whom you would like your questions to be addressed to, please do so. Okay. I have a couple of questions here. From Miss Melanie Unida. This question is directed to Okay, so to Ms. Esguerra, the pandemic opened a new normal even in the work setting. Work from home is now a common. Relative to this, how do you see now the work setup in the post-pandemic? Is this work from home setup will continue?
Thank you, Dr. Kris, and for that question. Definitely, RLC has instituted the telecommuting policy in place, wherein roles that can be done at home should be done at home. However, since we're a very highly operational entity, some of the roles will continue to be on site.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Guerra. We have another question for you. The Telecommunicating Act is a pre-pandemic legislation enacted in December 2018 with the IRR promulgated in March 2019. Is telecommuting practiced by RLC? How has this law helped RLC and other private businesses in general to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic? Are there areas for improvement vis-a-vis telecommuting in the country? Yeah, this question is addressed to Mrs. Guerra, but Director Cha might want to share her views as well. Let's start with Mrs. Guerra.
Okay, yes, definitely. The telecommuting helped the private sector to contain the spread of the virus. That was another approach because mass gatherings not allowed, and then we continued to operate. But again, it all depends also on the role, number one. Second, the capability, the technology capability at home. Is there an internet? Is there a laptop? These are the questions. I also heard the question on the challenge. As I observe, with the 18 months of telecommuting in some roles, trust is compromised, and again, connectivity can also be compromised, and the toll on the work-life balance because the work integrates into the personal life of the employee. So the immediate to answer that question, we have a telecommuting in place for certain roles. It's roles based, and as HR, we also take a look at the challenges that comes along with it as we continue with it during the pandemic.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Kris, may I
yes, Dr. Chan. Yes.
add to the discussion? Okay. So yes, the telecommuting law definitely helped us. While it was enacted pre-pandemic, it as you have as Dr. Cho has mentioned, during last year, we released many issuances and advisory encouraging companies to adopt flexible working arrangements, particularly telecommuting, to prevent job losses or termination of employees. So, when we did the study on telecommuting, this will really continue. I mean, we need to change the way we work, no? Post-pandemic, we need more innovative, compassionate workplaces. And to prevent risks, we are still experiencing deaths right now. And many of our workforce are still in fear of reporting for work every day. We are still encouraging companies, employers to allow their employees to work from home. No? If their operations will allow that. And according to our study on work from home during community quarantine, there are actually so many sectors that and functions that can be allowed to work from home or work from anywhere. So definitely work from home or telecommuting will be will still continue, and we really encourage our private sector employers to allow their workers.
Thank you, Director Cha. So we have another question from Mary Racelis of Ateneo de Manila University. This is directed to Dr. Cho. Decline in agricultural labor sector relates to growth of migrants to large cities where workers wind up in badly served informal settlements. Budget for decent housing in the city where jobs are tiny. How can workers, men and women living in informal settlements, gain better access to in-city employment through improved housing and tenure security in the city where jobs are. The urban poor are, after all, the largest workforce in the city.
Thank you so much for the question. I'm not sure I can answer the housing and security tenure aspects, but I understand that agriculture has been the biggest sector that is observing a lot of workers. But the migration happened, agricultural workers went into the city. They are the majority of informal sector workers, also living in informal settlements. This is a very challenging aspect. And a lot of these workers are affected by COVID-19, and part of them went back to their own province and own agricultural activities. That's why the agriculture temporarily increased during the pandemic. Do you have difficulty hearing me again?
We can hear you, Dr. Cho. Thank you.
But I think should be some holistic approach in the urban sector, informal sector. They are not different populations. They are the ones who got affected by COVID pandemic much, and housing, water and sanitation, access to education and social protection. So multi-sector intervention is really very important.
Okay, may I just chime in with this related question? This is from Ms. Sheila of PIDS. If I may connect the discussion on social protection today with the last Tuesday's discourse on green and inclusive recovery, is it possible to channel global climate funds to social protection? The poor are disproportionately affected by climate change-related disasters. So utilizing climate funds for social protection schemes that will mitigate these disasters' impact on the poor makes sense. Yes, Dr. Cho, you may want to share your views on this.
Thank you so much for the question. It's me again. I think in my last slide, I highlighted that targeted intervention for vulnerable sector is going to be very important, and they should be linked to the social protection. So I'd like to highlight that for youth or for poor, informal sector workers, they should be able to get access to social protection, including cash assistance or public work, and these kind of typical social protection measures. In addition to that, I think some people mentioned in the chat box, linking them to social insurance is going to be very important. Just simply pushing informal sector workers to be formalized is not going to work, and we have seen other countries' examples as well. So regardless of your employment arrangements, whether you're in wage employment or self-employment, just granting them access to social insurance, including unemployment insurance, is going to be very, very important.
Thank you, Dr. Cho. I have a question for Dr. Tata. When we talk about the post-pandemic world, we usually take the point of view of developing economies, developing countries, which usually have matured social protection system. But how should developing countries adjust to the post-pandemic world, given that we have underdeveloped social protection systems, and majority of our workers are those that are doing routine jobs that are being eliminated by adopting automation and digitalization, and we also have many workers working in the informal sector. So how should we adjust our social protection systems for that?
I do think firstly that what we are seeing from countries, based on what we are hearing at our intergovernmental meetings, is countries realizing that the countries which did well in combating the pandemic, in protecting the population, are the ones that had well-established comprehensive social protection systems. Everyone is talking about strengthening social protection. It's time for advocates to, in every government, people realize it cannot be business as usual. I think the willingness to allocate more funds to social protection is there now. There's a realization that this is required. Now, how far it will go, what shape it will take, will depend on how well we are able to advocate. It's an issue of resources, But that's why it's important that all the advocates within countries, we ensure that we definitely lead. One thing that should lead from the pandemic for developing countries is that you don't need to be rich to start implementing a social protection system. I know it needs resources, it needs reprioritization, but I think many countries have shown sometimes that having a good and robust, healthy workforce supported by social protection is the basis for the next leap of development. So if you see the success stories in our region, they started with producing a good social base, universal health care, and increased spending on social development is what provided the basis for the development of many of the tigers that you see in our region. And I think we need to acknowledge that. So number one, that informal economy, like Dr. Cho says, look, this is an issue. And I honestly must tell you, I'm talking to practitioners here. There are few good examples. There is no magic wand by which our informal economy will turn into formal at one go. I mean, with it 70%, 60%, it'll take time. Obviously, in the long term, the more formal an economy is, more that it feeds into the main system. There are many reasons why economies are informal. I mean, there are understandable reasons. Some people want to stay out of certain brackets. Some people want to remain small. But having said that, we have to find ways as they exist and not say that we will only include them in the social protection system when they become formal. That's not going to happen for years and decades, maybe. But maybe we got to leapfrog it by finding a way and innovative ways. And we are really looking forward to working with other agencies. We can only become relevant if we can design systems where we can show that informal sector can be covered. I think we have a lot to learn from the other developed countries. Sometimes we need to learn from others. How do they cover self-employed workers? What are the good examples from China? There are some, but yet I'm still looking for the comprehensively successful scheme of covering informal workers in our region. I haven't found one yet. A lot of this in the pilot stage. So that's my rather long answer to a simple question that you posed, Ms. Francisco.
Excellent answer, Dr. Tata. Okay.
Can I come in, Dr.
Yeah.
Kris?
Yes, yes.
About
Sure.
social protection. We all agree that social protection is important and the spending for social protection can be improved. We can improve, that would be great. But we all understand money is an issue, where government is finding money, where to cut. Reprioritizing is very important, as Dr. Tata mentioned. Also, at the same time, I'd like to highlight that using the resources smartly is going to be also very important. Not only just allocating a lot of resources for social protection, but also using the allocated resources in a more efficient manner. That's why we are working a lot with Department of Social Welfare Development. And some of the efforts that the SWD is doing in terms of automating and making the social protection intervention more efficient, working with the PSA regarding PIDS so that things can be digitized. These efforts are all important and it should be expedited as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. So here's another interesting question from Dr. Connie Dakuikoy of PIDS. Moving forward, should unemployment insurance be seriously considered by policymakers as a way to respond to labor market shocks? If yes, any thoughts on how this can be designed and implemented? I would like to first call on Director Cha. Yes.
Volunteer. Okay. Thank you for the question. We do have an unemployment insurance now, okay, with the revised charter of SSS. Okay, and actually, you will be surprised to know that for just a 2-year implementation, the SSS has already given 26 billion claims of workers for unemployment. So, but what is missing, and we would really like to where we've been sharing this to SSS, and to other social protection agencies is to link unemployment insurance with active labor market policies. So when we say active labor market policies, we refer to skills training, job coaching, job matching, because we don't want the employee or the worker to just get cash benefits. We want him or her to be re-employed. So we should give that person training, so that he or she will be re-employed in possibly in other sectors.
Dr. Tata, would you like to chime in?
I have to say that, look, it's very clear in the organized sector, people do have some form of protection. I mean, in the formal sector, like you say, the director explained, that this is already there, and we, to a certain extent. But what do you do about the large number of people who are self-employed or in the informal sector? People who are entrepreneurs whose businesses fail. It's just. But I think we just got to go beyond unemployment and perhaps look at other means of support. Unless we integrate the informal sector effectively into this, just having an unemployment insurance just for the formal sector may not answer all our problems. So now that's number one. Number two, I think the response, I would totally agree that that's a totally different aspect. The active labor market policies are equally important. When I say active labor market policy, we need to prepare people in many ways to take up the new jobs which are available. I think that's very, very important and sometimes overlooked. And something that both my co-panelists as well as the speakers, Dr. Cho and others, pointed out, there are jobs there for which perhaps there are not enough applicants. So, and you'll find, if you talk to industry, they'll tell you that there are jobs and there are no applicants in certain areas. In certain other areas where there are very limited jobs, there are a lot of people. So I think reskilling and also getting people for the new green jobs is going to be a very important area, but it's time. And I think we're already taking this beyond the jargon into actual implementation and identifying how we are going to do it. And of course, it's going to be a comprehensive program. And what you presented today is a very good starting step in terms of the national strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Cha? Would you like to comment, Dr. Cha?
Me? Yes, I'm reiterating what I said earlier. I think Director Cha can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think current SSS, the unemployment benefits can be claimed by not only formal sector workers, but also informal sector workers. There is no distinction, I understand. But what I think is important is you cannot just give unemployment insurance or benefits to everyone who are unemployed, because it is very difficult, to prove that you're unemployed and to prove that you're doing certain active labor market reskilling activities, or you're investing in your skills development. I think what's important is to design unemployment insurance in a way that the funds are available and sustainable. So there should be some contributory and risk pooling mechanism as insurance. And for the unemployment benefits that are not depending on the contributory systems can be directed to the vulnerable population who are covered by more active labor market programs that are being implemented by the government. And having the kind of systematic monitoring and evaluation system that one person can get SSS benefits and participating dollars to PAD and joining the WD's program and multi-tapping. So having coherent digitalized information system. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Dr. Cho. Another question on informality. I think that's a very important question. Is there really a need to formalize the informal sector? And if and when countries are able to craft a universal social protection system, one that is not dependent on formal employment? Dr. Tata, would you want to answer this question?
I think that is the challenge that all of us are facing right now. I mean, how do you have an effective social protection system that's financially viable, covers everyone. It's difficult, I understand. But yes, in the long term, like I said, we have to find a way. In the medium term, we have to find a way of extending social protection to those in the informal sector. But there are only pilot programs. There are some large scale. We need to find ways of extending social protection to those in the informal sector. But in the end, I think one has to acknowledge that informality is not something to be glorified always. I understand that sometimes we need to respect that some sectors will be small, but there is bringing them. I mean, if you can bring them, there are many benefits that you have in bringing them within the formal system, both in terms of the way they contribute to the economy and also are supported by the economy in general. So in the long term, I think we should be looking at promoting more formalization of the economy. But at the same time, we need to be pragmatic when we plan social protection, that the informal economy is not going to overnight change into formal economy. And we have to, in the interim, find ways of integrating. In fact, we have been talking to the ILO in the UN system that perhaps the extension of social protection to the workers in the informal sector is perhaps the first step towards integration of the sector and formalization of some of these sectors, to bringing them within the ambit of formalization. So I think the extending social protection can be the first step. Maybe my colleague.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Kris, may I add? Okay. When we were reviewing policies and programs for in preparation for the national social protection, establishment of the social protection floor in the Philippines, we really observed that there are already certain levels of social protection for the poor because of war peace and for those in the private sector, employee-employee relationship. And Dr. Tata is right, as well as Dr. Shaw, that the gap is in the missing middle, the informal sector workers. So the social protection floor seeks to, one of the objectives of this floor is for all types of workers to have basic income security. So I remember one of the recommendations under that document is a premium subsidy for vulnerable informal sector workers. Because when we had consultations with them, we found out that it's very difficult for them to really pay the premium, given their average income of, I think, 10,500 per month. The premium for a 10,500 monthly salary ceiling is 1,365, and they cannot afford a premium of 1,365. So there are several costings that we did to and propose a premium subsidy for certain types of informal sector workers. But the good news, Dr. Tata, is that in the revised SSS Charter, the informal sector workers are already included. They are mandatory to be a part of the social insurance system. However, the challenge is how to to make them members of our institutions.
Thank you, Director Cha. So we have a question here from Mrs. Esguerra. Has the pandemic led to layoffs among contractuals and regular employees? Do you foresee reduction in employment, or job should be work from home as the normal after the pandemic?
Okay. Unfortunately, for sectors with reduced operations like the hotels, I will be honest that there were layoffs that happened. But before we did that, we first allowed them to use their leaves and then do furlough. And then when the situation did not improve yet, then we had a voluntary retirement program. There were takers, but also there were people who opted to wait out and stay. So I think it really depended on the sector that were badly hit, and in the hotels we are. But in other sectors that are performing, real estate, office buildings, in the mall, we're coping. What we did is actually maximize our existing talents. Now, back to your point on the work from home. definitely it is beneficial. Beneficial because it helps the whole community at large to contain the virus spread and protect our employees and their families. Now, the way I look at it, post-pandemic, there would still be people going back to the offices because it is a necessary relationship. It is necessary as well as in terms of technology support. There are a number of things that would be effective being done back in the offices post-pandemic.
Thank you, Mrs. Guerra. Okay, so people are keep going back to the informal sector. So I'm just gonna throw this question again. Yes, Dr. Tata.
I just wanted to very interesting point that Ms. Princess brought up. I mean, I just wanted to tell you what we're hearing at the regional level. I mean, the fact is, I think the working from home, even before COVID, we had what's known as the new informality, the growing number of gig workers. You know, it's, even in developed countries, people who hitherto were increasing number of freelancers who are working from anywhere in the world. And that after COVID, though that number has actually grown. Increasingly, there are two trends we are noticing. One, corporates and others in general realize that, yes, like Ms. Princess says, some kind of workers they will want back in the office, but a lot of companies are reassessing their real estate needs. I think you will find that at least a small portion of the workers increasingly will be working from home. Secondly, there are certain jobs for which they will not be employing people on a long term. They'll be contracting these jobs out because they realize that the virtual method of working allows you to choose workers anywhere for whatever period of time. But that means that those workers will be on a contractual basis. And that kind of leads to a fact that they are not, unless we devise a way, they're not part of any social protection system. They're being paid lump sums for delivery, and they're not necessarily part of any social protection system. So remember that the gig workers is an increasingly large component and a newly emerging form of informality. And definitely, I think virtual working is here to stay. I mean, whether it be hybrid, some people coming in, some people working from home, but it's here to stay. And I think it's very clear that that has huge implications for the way we interact with each other, and the amount about the way human resources looks at how we build teams. But from what we're hearing, a number of companies do not see coming back to work for the entire workforce as an option. In fact, it's going to be whether it's going to be 60% or 80%. You know, in our business network meetings, this is what we're hearing, that a lot of them are really cutting the real estate. They don't believe that they need to have 3 floors of offices. I just need 1 floor with hoteling. So just wanted to pipe in with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Tata. I have a personal question.
May I add, Dr. Kris? Okay.
Yes, please.
So just for the education of our participants, in our survey on work from home during community quarantine, because we are advocating that more employers allow their workers not to work from home or work from anywhere, we realized that functional areas can be used as criteria of the employers to determine eligibility of employees to telecommute. So we did an online survey among 276 companies, okay, covering 118,950 employees. And they say that as to functional areas, here are the areas that can be allowed for telecommuting: sales and customer support, human resource, finance, treasury, financial management, and maybe Ms. Esguerra can validate corporate communication or social media, finance, controllership, accounting, audit, marketing and brand management, information technology, administration and facilities management, research, product design and development, logistics and physical distribution, materials management, procurement, engineering, even in certain aspects of manufacturing, production, and operations. But we really have to have digital solutions. We need to implement digital solutions to be able to increase the number of people who will work from it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to another question. I'm addressing this question to Director Chan. Are there health and safety programs to protect workers in the small-scale industries and informal sectors?
That's a difficult question. Okay. For the well, for definitely for all establishments, they are governed by our inspection program. So we implement, we enforce our OSH standards so that our establishments can comply, no, and ensure that the people there are safe. But for the informal sector workers, maybe in in mga markets, palengke, mga vendors, di ba? In small carinderias, we need the help of local government units. We have been partnering with our local government units, particularly the public employment service offices, to also be capacitated on OSH standards so that will be able to help us implement, OSH standards for those in the informal sector, because we are only mandated to cover establishments.
Thank you so much, Director Cha. Okay, I have a personal question. This from me. It was shown earlier in your slide that there was an 8.8% decrease in working hours. This is your ILS 2021 data. However, if you
that's an ILO data for
ILO, okay,
global.
Oh, okay, it's global. Because I was just wondering, because if you read the recent literature, studies would often say that workers are putting in more hours because of the work from home situation, but low productivity, more hours of work. I just feel that there's a disconnect between the figure that you've shown and what I've been reading from the literature. So do you want to share your thoughts on this, Director Cha?
That is your observation on more working hours for those working from home is actually also true. But the figures would refer to and I think underemployment figures. If there is reduction in the number of working hours, it will result to underemployment, and so that is where the difference lies.
Thank you, Dr. Cha. Okay, let me read some other questions. I will direct this question to Dr. Cho. Does it mean that workforce of today must acquire new skills to remain relevant in the post-pandemic world?
Sorry, can you say that again, the last part of the question? What kind of new skills?
It was not specified. It just said that, does this mean that workforce today must acquire new skills to remain relevant in the post-pandemic new norm?
I think absolutely. Regardless of the pandemic, the labor market is changing and evolving, and the global flows of the labor and technology and market is really demanding the workforce to reskill and upgrade their skills all the time. But because of the pandemic, it is going to be even more important. I alluded earlier a little bit like digital skills. That's important for everywhere. Digital basic literacy or intermediate or very high level digital skills are going to be more on high demand. And green skills, what do you mean by green skills? Emphasize a lot about green jobs and green development, but green skills are going to be very important for that matter. And we have discussed a lot on Industrial Revolution 4.0, automation and artificial intelligence. So, if you want to be relevant, not replaced by the machines, then your social emotional skills are going to be even more difficult in addition to your technical skills. So there are going to be more demands for new skills and going to continue.
Okay, here's another question for Dr. Cha. Dr. Cho mentioned some sectors that have high pay but are less absorbing. Is this because of the lack of qualified workforce or the lack of jobs created in the sector? This distinction is important since each require different interventions.
That's absolutely true. But I will have to say it is combination of both. Some sectors they want to grow further, and Miss Princess can come in and then talk about more. But real estate, high-paying jobs, and there's more demand for high-skilled workers, maybe, but then the employers may not find the appropriately equipped skilled workforce. That could be one reason. The other aspect is that the public administration, government jobs, they are also kind of relatively well-paying jobs, but there is limited scope for growth. So those jobs have limited ability to increase in workforce. So it is a combination of both. What's important is really is the person who mentioned to identify the sectors that have high job potential, and building the workforce that are equipped to undertake those tasks that are required by those jobs is going to be.
Thank you, Dr. Cho. So this is a general question and anybody can answer. How do governments balance major elements of social protection, considering that these elements may compete among each other for very limited resources? Can I start with you, Director Cha? Because you're working in the government.
Okay. Yes, I agree with the observation. That's why I cannot overemphasize the institutionalization of a social protection floor for all, okay, in terms of providing essential universal health care, okay, access of children to education, nutrition, and care, basic income security for the working age population, particularly in addressing risks of unemployment, disability, maternity, and pension for the elderly. So I think we need to prioritize. We really need to prioritize as a country. What is the minimum level of social protection that we will give to our citizens, and then work for higher levels of protection for different sectors of society, particularly the vulnerable and the much needed.
Okay,
but I'd like to add that I like what Dr. Tata presented a while ago in terms of the fiscal space, particularly with the Asian countries, and I would say that because an observation is that social protection is expensive, it's costly, but we don't see it as an investment. We see it as a cost. But relative to other countries, what we spend for social protection is really small. According to NEDA, I think we just spend around 2.something% of GDP for social protection, while in other countries they are already 11% of GDP. So yeah, if that's why we are really we will present the social protection for recommendations to the cabinet hopefully next month, and we hope that the recommendations will be approved.
Thank you, Director Cha. Dr. Tata, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think she's. I think that Cha has really highlighted what I wanted to say. Look, I think when you say a limited pot, the pot has to expand. I mean, the fact is we are not spending enough. There is no way we can spend 2.6% of our GDP on social protection and expect to provide quality, comprehensive social protection for the entire population. However, it's pragmatic. It's important to note that it's not that you can suddenly cover the entire. The intent has to be there, a strategy has to be there. And like Dr. Cha says, maybe it can be incremental. I mean, in terms of the level. In fact, that's what our social protection simulation tool that we have developed in consultation with others to say, okay, if you want to give 30%, 40%, depending on how much level of how much, and you can know the impact that it will have. So often, so one, I would agree that without, it's got to be incremental, but it can't be postponed. The work has to start now. I would say we should always keep universality in mind. I have to say one thing, that people love the word targeted. I'm going to cover. You're going to miss a lot. Targeting comes at great cost of exclusion. You neither, the cost of targeting, the underlying cost of targeting is you neither meet the needs of those who are targeting and you miss out a lot. So comprehensive is the way to go, and doesn't mean when you put comprehensive social protection, you ensure that everyone who's in need of it qualifies for it instead of already being excluded by what you have in place. So I do think that we need to increase we have to consciously, we cannot keep the allocation at the level as what it is. There has to be a conscious commitment made to increase social protection spending. And the question is, it needs to come across as a bipartisan. I mean, irrespective of which government comes in power, there has to be a consistency in this effort. And I think that the momentum is there now. I mean, you can see the impact of COVID. You can know from this discussion that the push, and I have great hope, I think, for the Philippines. You can see a lot of the discussion coming up, and there is this, it's great to see the participation here. And I'm hoping that Philippines can be one of the flag bearers in this respect, that you don't have to. So I have some hope with the dynamic support. And I also, before, I don't know if I'll want, I'm so honored to be part of such a gender balanced. I'm the only man, and I'm working in social development. When often I'm on panels where there are very few women, I'm very happy that I'm the lone man here. And I'm very honored that each one of the women here outshone me by far. I'm very proud. Thank you.
Dr. Tata.
Dr. Kris,
Yes?
just to make the discussion more exciting,
Okay, Dr.
I challenge some of the arguments. Don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely supporting that the government has to step up in strengthening social protection and increasing the pot. But I'd like to caution against this comparison of, share of SP spending per GDP across the different countries, because Philippines is a very young country. Other countries' social protection spending is so high because they are aging and aged countries. Their pension spending is enormous. The Philippines is not there yet. And as the population is aging, it will go there. So just comparing the level of spending and should increase, that argument is not, I'd like to just caution against it. But when it comes to balancing the social protection, earlier the question was, there are competing demands within social protection as well. So what should we do? So increasing social protection pot is definitely one thing. But within the pot, how do we allocate the social protection? I'd like to agree with Dr. Tata and Director Chow about the, balancing different population groups, really investing in young, healthy, early start, strong start is going to be important. Working age population, elderly, so different life stages will require different type of social protection. So balancing the life cycle is going to be important. One thing that I'd like to highlight is, social protection is not just one instrument. There are different instruments, including social assistance, social insurance, active labor market programs. So balancing those programs are going to be.
Yes, Dr. Tata.
Yeah, I mean, look, her point about the GDP is very correct. I understand, but at the same time, it's a very good indication. And what you're going to spend on contributory pensions today, if you don't start preparing now, and I have to remind Dr. Cho that we have the fastest aging population, this region. You know that the speed of aging of ASEAN, they're reaching 7 to 14% in something like less than 25 years. So a lot of that contribution will have to come when people are still at the working age. So the point that I don't think it's just the age of the population. I would just like to say that yes, it's not, but you can get an indication. If the world average is 11% and the regional average is 7%, and you have an average of 2.6%, if it's not an indication for you, then I would like to then look at the comparators, what you are looking at. It is just a very rough indicator, but it is an indicator. And I am also, yes, efficiency, absolutely. That's a lot of these things go without saying. But there are some basics, the universal truths that go, that there is a minimum expenditure required. I mean, I would agree that you can't just say that something which is spending, like in US, spent 14 or 16% of its health budget on healthcare, but provided much poorer status of healthcare compared to countries which spent far lower percentages. That's a just, but then it can be an indication, but still we are asking for increasing in percentage. But your point is very well taken, but it is just a guidance. But if you say that we are not, even if it's 2.5 or 1.5, it doesn't matter. I think that some of these are good indications. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately we are, okay, Dr. Cha.
No. I agree with Dr. Tata. Don't get me wrong, I didn't say that it doesn't matter, but I'm just cautioning against, over interpreting, but I agree with you.
Okay, unfortunately we have to cut short our Q&A because we have run out of time. Thank you for the enriching discussion, for sharing your expert views, Mrs. Esguerra, Dr. Cho, Dr. Tata, and Director Satumba. To formally close the session, I would like to ask each of you to say some parting words. Let's start with Mrs. Esguerra.
Okay, so Dr. Kris, there is a saying that between a stimulus and response is space. And in that space lies our freedom and our response. And in our response lies our growth and happiness. I think this is the perfect opportunity for this crisis to go hand in hand, private sector, government, individual, everyone, to contribute and turn this crisis into opportunity. It is a shared responsibility. That's what we tell our employees. Defeating this virus is a shared responsibility. And we know that by thinking of a collective good, then we will rise together as one.
Dr. Cho.
Miss Princess, such an eloquent manner. She spoke very well. I relocated to Manila in January 2020. After 2 months, we went into lockdown. So I didn't have a chance to really interact a lot more with our Filipino friends and see this beautiful country. And we all know that it has been, but as Ms. Princess said, it's not the time for despair. It's using this COVID-19 and awakening of some of the areas that we discussed today into opportunities. And government, businesses, labor, and workers, and all Filipinos have a role to play. And this seminar wonderfully captured some aspects of each. So thank you so much, and looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Dr. Tata.
I have great hope. I mean, this is one of the more inspiring events that I've attended, and I think the comprehensiveness of the discussion, the openness of the discussion, and the desire of the government to move forward. I mean, the positive intent. I think we are really looking to Philippines to be. It is one of the champion countries for our social protection regional action plan, and I believe that you may set the trend leading ahead. So I really have great expectations, and I'm very honored to be with this group of panelists and with this group of thinkers. So thank you so much for giving UNSCAP this opportunity.
And lastly, Director Cha.
Thank you, Dr. Kris. So, well, given the unemployment and underemployment challenge that we have, we really need to have a comprehensive and inclusive strategy for job creation coupled with social protection. Okay. So, thank you for Dr. Tata for saying that he has high hopes for us. And rest assured that the Department of Labor and Employment is really committed to ensuring decent work for all workers, even during this pandemic. And at the company level, this is also my personal advocacy, that we have to really we need to change the way we work to be able to protect our workers. We really have to be more innovative and more compassionate. And that's why I really thank Ms. Esguerra for sharing their story with us. No? So let's think of ways to keep our workers safe and healthy, implement digital solutions, telecommuting, work from home, work from anywhere, and please take care of the mental health of your workers. We'd like to see more social enterprises. That is one way for informal sector workers to thrive, really social enterprises, where there is profit sharing, where there is growth to these types of workers. So that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to join the audience to please give our speakers a virtual round of applause for doing well today. Thank you so much. And I will now turn over the floor to Ms. Sheila for the introduction of the speaker for the closing ceremony of the APPC. Maraming salamat po. Ms. Sheila?
Thank you very much, Dr. Kris Francisco, for your engaging facilitation of the webinar. And again, thank you to all our speakers for their valuable insights, and of course, to all those who participated in the discussion. Maraming salamat po. I am Sheila CR. I am part of the organizing committee for the Development Policy Research Month celebration, which includes the APPC webinar series. Friends, our 4-day webinar series has come to a close, but this doesn't mean that we are ending the conversation here. And through our research and knowledge dissemination activities, PIDS will continue to advocate the DPRM and APPC theme of rebuild and reset for a better Philippines in the post-pandemic world. We do hope that you will do the same in your respective sectors and endeavors, as a policymaker, as a development planner, as an educator, researcher, civil society member, business operator or owner, or as a media practitioner. We hope that the wealth of insights shared by our esteemed panel of speakers and reactors in all 4 webinars has inspired all of you, has inspired everyone to take the reset and rebuild agenda to heart, and will help actualize it through firm and steadfast action. So to formally close our event is a prolific legislator and believer of evidence-based policymaking. I'm talking about Senator Juan Edgardo Angara, better known as Sonny Angara. He has some words of wisdom to share with us, but first allow me to say a few words about him. He has sponsored or authored more than 200 laws in his 16 years as a legislator, first as Aurora Province representative from 2004 to 2013, and then as senator from 2013 to the present. He has authored a number of landmark legislation such as the Free College Law, the Free Kindergarten Law, the Universal Healthcare Act, the Expanded Public Employment Service Office Act, the Kasambahay Law, the OWA Charter, the Expanded Senior Citizens Act, the National Athletes and Coaches Benefits and Incentives Act, and the National Sports Academy Act. He currently serves as the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Finance and is advocating a Tatak Pinoy, or Proudly Filipino strategy for making Philippine goods and services more sophisticated and globally competitive. Seeing the potential of Filipino professionals to succeed further in the digital economy, he filed the National Digital Careers Act and the National Digital Transformation Act, bills which have garnered renewed interest in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Senator Angara also serves as the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Youth. Friends, he can't be with us today due to an equally important activity that requires his presence, but he sent us this message. So friends, let's listen to the remarks of Senator Sonny Angara.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to greet all the participants of the annual policy conference of PIDS or PIDS and all the research fellows and all the participants. Congratulations. And it's been a 4-day conference for you. So there must be some relief aside from that. Congratulations for continuing to think about the world's pressing problems. And it may seem daunting at times, but we shouldn't forget that some of the present day institutions that we utilize today grew out of crisis, war, economic depression, some of the most difficult challenges that humankind has faced. So congratulations, and we hope those problems were here before COVID. In a sense, COVID made them worse. And it is a very difficult time for us. But hopefully we can emerge from it stronger, and things like sustainable development and environmental challenges may have been put on the back burner. But hopefully we take the opportunity, because there will be a clamor for fast action and change. And we hope it's the change of the right kind that will also address not just COVID, but also the problems of the pre-COVID world. And will lead to inclusive growth that's better for everyone and better for the planet. So congratulations once again, and we look forward to reading of some of the solutions generated by this important conference. Congratulations once again. Thank you. God bless.
And before our virtual event, we have some announcements. Okay, so the presentations you heard today can be downloaded from the PIDS website. Just go to the event section, and you may also download the files from the TPRM website. Please help us improve our webinars by answering the survey that will pop on your screen when you leave the meeting room. Your feedback is important to us. The Secretariat will also email you the link in case you miss the survey. Okay, so be updated on the latest PIDS resources and forthcoming events. Just follow us on our website and our social media accounts. Their URLs are flashed on the screen. Okay, and friends, we may have completed our APPC webinar series, but this doesn't mean that our DPRM celebration is over. Yes, we have one more virtual event. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll hold the 7th Mindanao Policy Research Forum in partnership with the Mindanao Development Authority and the Caraga State University. And this forum will still carry our DPRM and APPC theme, but the discussion will be focused on Mindanao's challenges and opportunities with respect to resetting and rebuilding for a better Mindanao in the post-pandemic world. So as you can see on the screen, you will hear messages from the heads of CSU, PIDS, and MINDA. And there will also be presentations from Dr. Margarita Debuque Gonzalez of PIDS, Dr. Romel Seronay of CSU, and Mr. Roberto Cadodoy Balion, a Fisher folk leader and community environmentalist who was a recipient of the 2021 Ramon Magsaysay Award. We also invited panelists from the business sector, academia, and civil society, and we do hope that you will join us in this virtual event tomorrow afternoon. Please check our Facebook page for the registration link, and if you fail to register, you can still watch the live stream of this event on our Facebook page. Okay, a few more reminders. For more information about this year's DPRM celebration, simply visit the DPRM website at dprm.pids.gov.ph. It contains everything that you need to know about our celebration this year, and the site will be accessible even after September. And finally, we would like to thank all the agencies from the government, from the private sector, academia, civil society, and media that joined us today. You can see the names of these entities on the screen, and we also appreciate the participation of our Facebook viewers and those who follow the live tweets of this webinar via our Twitter page. So friends, this concludes our APPC webinar series for 2021. Thank you so much for being a part of our DPRM celebration this year. Let us learn from the lessons of this pandemic and use every opportunity to reset and rebuild for a better Philippines in the post-pandemic world. Maraming salamat po.